I'm thankful today that I get to preach and give Will a little break. We jokingly call this youth directors or anybody other than the head of staff's preaching Sunday because all pastors deserve a break after the craziness of Lent and Holy time. It is extremely wonderful to preach Thomas again and to be in front of all of you. I've got to know a few of you over my time here, but it's just great to be able to share another way I serve. And like we said, the idea of Thomas. Thomas is always called Doubting Thomas. Have you ever heard of him just called Thomas? I wonder if you had his ID, if it would say Doubting Thomas. But the funny thing, even Thomas is a nickname. If you heard the wonderful story that she read, they called him Didymus, which is literally twin. And they called him this because his real name was Judas. Judas was a very common name then. And in the Bible, they really wanted to separate him out from Judas of Iscariot. The one who betrayed Jesus? They didn't want to mix the two up. Thomas is really mentioned in the Bible, and his gospel, the Gospel of Thomas, didn't even get canonized into our Bible. And it seems like he gets really a bad rap for when he is mentioned. You see, in Acts, he was there with Peter as one of the apostles, but Peter's the only one who's mentioned. And to be referred as doubting, I don't know about you, but when I die, I don't want to have a negative connotation to myself. I hope historians are really more nice to me. So, here we are, year after year, the Revised Common Lectionary puts the story of Thomas right after Easter. So year after year, we talk about this doubting. And every single time when I grew up, I heard preaching, you need to have the faith to not see and to believe. But really? Does poor Thomas need this bad rap? Is there more to Thomas than this? Let's look at the details in the story. In this story, sight and touch are very strong impressions and provide evidence to be tested. Peter and the other disciples saw the empty tomb. Mary Magdalene heard her name being called. And as a female preacher, I have to say, she was the first one commissioned, a female being commissioned first. Just saying. On the day of the resurrection, the rest of the disciples, they didn't even have to wait that long. From the empty tomb to that night, Jesus appeared to them in a locked, secured room. Locked tomb, locked room. Jesus has no problems going where he needs to go. Jesus told the disciples, "Peace be with you," and breathed on them. And Thomas missed out everything. Thomas had not seen, had not touched, or smelled Jesus like the others had. And he not heard any of the words that Jesus had spoken. So why do we scold Thomas for not getting this right? Why are we so skeptical? Why do we call him doubting? How would you feel if you were on a test and everyone else got a cheat sheet and you did not? You were left with no experiences, no knowledge, no nothing. Yeah, you would probably fail too. How much easier would it be if we had Jesus right here at First Presbyterian Church preaching and teaching? If we could have coffee at Perk Up with Jesus and pick his brain and ask all the questions we wanted to. There would be no more debates, not even over one iota, no more arguing of how many wise men there were, no more schisms in the church, no more debating over women and leadership in the church, or plenty of other things. We've all seen how it goes in churches. It would be so much easier, right? But that's not our reality. It wasn't the reality of the church after Jesus' ascension. Thomas' story opens up a new stage in the faith life and the life of the church, where faith comes from God, but it is based upon solely not from sight or from touch of your own, but from the stories and touches and sights of others, which is passed down to us through the Bible. In this new passage, or in this new stage, please note Jesus' reaction to Thomas's questions. Jesus spoke an invite to touch and see. He didn't say, nope, you should have done it. I'm not giving you any of the answers. I'm not giving you the experiences. Jesus welcomes. What matters most is that Jesus welcomes the questions and gave an answer. Jesus said, and Thomas answered. The words did it. Touching became irrelevant, perhaps even rude or offensive. If you look at the story, it does not say that Thomas actually even touched or did anything. Thomas responded with the most powerful response and the most first proclamation that ever happened. My Lord, my God. Today's church doesn't get to touch, smell, or see Jesus, but we can hear the words of Jesus. Christians should not be trained to be gullible regarding as suckers blinded in naivete. We are here to hear and to study and to question. We should not doubt, just believe. Nah. Jesus welcomed the questions. We should welcome doubt and questions and look for the answers in a community. And sometimes we have to accept that there might not be an answer because God's wisdom is way beyond anything our brains can fathom. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with my 4-year-old John. You know, kids are the best theologians sometimes. His question was, who made God? Really? The only one worse is this one because she went to seminary with me, so she has way worse seminary questions. Well, we'll talk about all those questions later. Trust me. You get limited 2 questions a day. Well, for a 4-year-old, Lauren, for a 4-year-old who has no abstract thinking, who is just a concrete thinker, try to tell him that no one made God, God is God, and God made everything? Yeah, how well do you think that answer went over? So then we had to go further into, sometimes we don't understand everything. And that's okay. But our human nature, are we okay with not knowing everything? Are we okay with the questions we still have lingering? Or does that feel like icky to you? I know to me, yeah. And so we have to come to the understanding, are these questions that we'll never know? Or are these questions that we need to divide into and ask more on? And honestly, do these questions really matter in the long run? Sometimes, no. Sometimes we go down these rabbit holes in these questions and we get so focused on some things that we miss the picture. For example, while I was reading on the commentaries for this sermon, one of the persons went on for over a page wondering what Jesus' breath smelled like. In verse 22, Jesus is breathed on the disciples. He went on for a whole page. Does it smell like the Last Supper? Does it smell like the fish and the olives that they've ate together for years? Did it smell like the gall that, depending on which gospel, did he drink or did he not drink? He went on for a whole page. I finally was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to a different one because you know what? Did that matter to the whole purpose of the gospel? No. In Psalm 150, which we read for our call to worship, it says, It tells us that if we are exceedingly focused on the trivial, we focus more on the inward and away from God. It's sometimes hard for our human to not know, but it's nice to have people around you saying, does this really matter? But is it vital to the story of Thomas to know what Jesus' breath like, or vital to know how many wise men there were? Not really. Hermeneutics of suspicion is a double-edged sword. Healthy if focusing on God, or harmful if we're focusing on the minute details. And sometimes the minute details matter, but if we lose the forest and the trees, what's really going on? Asking the right questions and finding them are sometimes hard. Are we focusing on which doubts matters? Are we studying the right things? Are we questioning, asking things that divide the church or uniting the church? You know, I've been in so many churches where we've seen different things, like the person who doubted and questioned if the counters were doing it right. The youth pastor who did not believe the person saying, you know, I'm experiencing something that's just not right. All those doubts, all those things, all those questions. I've seen nasty schisms in the church. If you've been around the church long enough, you've seen it. So question, is this what's really going on, or is this something else? If he insists that there is no way he will believe such an unbelievable story like Timothy did, why do we fault him? There's good reason to single out Thomas for inadequate faith, but the fact that he wanted what everybody else wants, not really. I can't blame him, after all. The real reason, even if you look at the story really enough, the reason why we should rebuff him is the fact that he was with his very friends to whom he shared such a long time with Jesus. Loved and trusted within the faithful community are significant expressions of the work of Christ in our midst. And he didn't believe them. He doubted. He questioned. He wanted to know stuff. But the fact that just an hour after the resurrection, just within a few hours, there was already doubt and question amongst those who spent years with Jesus, shows what the church was headed towards. Thus, the community that Jesus had tried to build so hard through the gospel was threatened from the very beginning by Thomas's skepticism. We must learn to believe not simply in the goodness of the Lord, but in the goodness of one another, even when they deliver the strangest of news. After all, if I was in Thomas's place and Tom came up and told me this strange stuff, I don't know if I would believe it right off the bat. We see the replication of the life of Jesus in the early days of the church in this Acts passage, which is why Thomas was there with Peter, even if he wasn't named. In Gilliman's words, he mentioned two people who were killed off, and then their followers disbanded. But Jesus' followers, when he was killed off, were not disbanded. Gilliman had a great insight and understanding. After all, he was Paul/Saul's, whichever name you want to say, teacher. If there were going to be problems within the disciples, starting with Thomas, not trusting with others, then just like the church today, the disciples had to come together and figure things out. They had to figure out how to work together in the worst possible situations, like persecution. These disciples were put in jail so many times. But right before this story, they had gotten out of jail, started preaching again, and then they were taken again to go in front of the authorities. And they wanted to kill them. So, And even after being flogged, they rejoiced. So sometimes we have to figure out how to go through the hardest parts and figure it out together. One of the ways the church can work together is by studying together, to understand God more and to listen to the doubts and talk about the questions. If this isn't a safe place to bring your doubts and questions about anything, where is? Thomas is, after all, us. We haven't seen or touched Jesus. We have questions and we have doubts. How much easier would it be to believe in Jesus, just showing up right in front of us and say, put your fingers here, see my hands. Reach your hand out and put it in my side. Or to be able to ask Jesus any questions we want, but not having them here. Not actually makes our faith stronger, because we believe without any of that. Believed that those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. We still have questions and we still have doubts. Yes, I'm one of them. And we do not accept something just because that has traditionally been done. So is it doubt, or just is it a quest to be able to have the same understanding as everyone else? How are you going to go on your quest with your doubts and questions and strengthen your faith? How are you going to answer your inner Thomas? In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.